In this tutorial, we will cover the basics of editing in Adobe Premiere. That includes importing clips, trimming them, creating a timeline, adding titles, doing basic audio management, and then going ahead and preparing everything for export, and then exporting in a file type that you can then upload onto YouTube and share out. Some of the things in this tutorial might look different depending on what version of Adobe Premiere you are using, but the basic controls are all the same. So first thing we have is our layout here. On our left-hand side is our source viewer. Our right-hand side is our program viewer. This shows you exactly what you have on the timeline down here. Timelines in Adobe Premiere are called sequences. And then this window over here has a couple of tabs. We're going to be mostly working in the project window. So if you go ahead and click on that, we now need to import files into Adobe Premiere to start working on. So we'll double click in here, and then we will choose our file that we want to import and click Import. Now the next step is important because what it does is it allows you to match your sequence settings, which is your timeline, to your clip settings. If those don't match up, it's sort of trying to it's kind of like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. So we need those things to both match up very well. And the way that you do that is you can drag your clip onto what looks like a post-it note there. And then what it'll do is it'll make a sequence that exactly fits your clip settings, which is really important. And then in here, one of the things I might want to do is just twirl down the audio. In some later versions of Premiere, you actually double click inside of that to expand that out. And now it's just added this clip to the timeline, which we don't need, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. First thing we'll take a look at is creating subclips from our main clips. So maybe you've shot a long clip and you need to cut that down into little pieces to add onto your timeline. So what I need to do is just double click on that and it'll add it to my source viewer. Inside of my source viewer, I set the spot where I want the video to begin, and then I hit I on my keyboard and I move a little bit further down to where I want the out to happen, and I click O on my keyboard. And then I can drag from this window down onto my timeline that specific clip that I've set the in and out points on. If I just want to grab the video piece, maybe this is B-roll that's going over someone talking, I would drag just the video piece. If this was my voiceover that I recorded on the camera, then I might just want the audio piece, and then I go ahead and drag that and put that down there. If I want to create another clip inside of this video, then I would just set new in and out points. So I just hit I on my keyboard, then spacebar to play, and then spacebar to stop, and then O, and I'll drag that down as well. So you can make multiple clips of a main clip, and it doesn't change anything inside of there. So what I'm going to do now is show you some audio management. So inside of the clips, on the audio track, there is this yellow line that you can drag up to increase the volume or drag down to decrease the volume of the entire clip. But if I wanted to, say, have a little bit of natural sound at the beginning of my report and then have that sound dip so that the voiceover can start, that's a different kind of edit. So maybe what I do is I turn up the volume of the clip so that when it starts, it's at a good volume for the beginning of the clip. And then what I'm going to do is add 2 keyframes. And keyframes are points in either audio or video where something changes. And the way I do that is with the pen tool. So I'm going to click on the pen tool and put in 2 keyframes, right? Because here's what would happen if I just did 1 keyframe. because there's only one keyframe there, it's changing the entire volume of the clip. So I need to add 2 keyframes, because then we have a beginning and an end point to our effect. And if you look at that, actually what's happening here is I'm saying, okay, here I want to start making this volume go down, and that's where I want to stop. Now, if we wanted to make this go down all the way to 0, we would drag it down to 0, but maybe we want some net sound to continue to play as our voiceover begins. So let's pretend that that's our voiceover. And then, maybe this is a sound bite that comes in after that. So that's basic audio management. Typically when you're playing your voiceover section or your interview section, you want it to fall past this -18 mark. So 18 or above, but you want to make sure that you're not at 0, because then that would be too loud. So really, -18 to about -6 or so is where you want that sweet spot to be. All right, so we've got clips on the timeline, but maybe we decide we need to change them somehow. A couple of easy ways to do that. So if you need to shorten or lengthen a clip, hover over the end of it, and you'll get a sort of red arrow, if you see that. Let's see here. So what you can do there is shorten or lengthen your clips so that they fit the time allotted. If you need to cut a clip in half, you can use your razor blade over here. And then what we can do is move that and say we need to pop, a different piece of video in there. And you'll notice, as you begin to edit more and more, you'll learn your own workflow. But what I typically like to do is have my A roll on video 1 and audio 1, and then any kind of B roll would go up on video 2, just like that. So it keeps everything a little bit neater as you're editing. So we've gone over basic edits of adding clips, creating in and out points, doing basic audio management, um, using B-roll. Let's go ahead and add in a title. So what I'm going to do on my keyboard is hit Command-T on my Mac. You would do Control-T on Windows machines. Then it's asking me for a name of my title. This is just a file name. It's not like the title. It's not the content of the title. And then once you're in the titling tool, you've got very, very easy tools to use to create basic titles. I don't really like any of these title styles down in the bottom section. I think they're a little bit too busy. And then just to recap what these lines here inside of the title are, this inner line is your title safe boundary. The outer line is your action safe boundary. We worry about those a little bit less now that we're producing video for online, though for video that you think might be viewed on a TV, you'd really want to keep all of your action inside of this outer boundary and your titles inside of this inner boundary. So let's go ahead and make a basic title. I'm just going to click anywhere in there and add in some text. Now, obviously, this is not the text that I want to be used, so I'm going to do maybe Arial. I'm going to do maybe solid. I generally like solid white, although this background is very bright, so it's probably not the best selection. And then typically, my second line is a bit smaller than my first. Maybe we want to do this around about 45. and do the second line around 30. That looks pretty good. And then I could just X out of that. I don't have to save because it creates the title inside of the project window. And then what I would do is drag that onto my clip, and then it appears. Now, obviously, if I was using this clip, I wouldn't render my title like that. I would probably use a different color. But you see over top of, let's say, video like that, even then, what I might do is go in and throw in maybe like a rectangle that comes out from that side. What I'm going to do then is make it maybe blue, dark blue, and turn down the opacity a little bit, and then also send that to back, and then just sort of fix my title. Something like that. So and then that way it stands out a little bit from the background. I do like the backgrounds to have a bit of opacity just so that it's not a solid block of text. So those are the basic edits inside of Premiere that you really need to know how to do. I did get the question a few times about, what about my audio if I record in stereo and I hear my audio coming out of just the left ear? How do I fix that? Under the Effects tab, type in Fill, and then you get options Fill Left or Fill Right. So depending on which ear you hear the audio in, I would then drag that onto my audio clip. And what it would do is it would basically create a mono mix. So it would double the one ear so that you hear it out of both. That's one of the questions I got. Also, perhaps at the end of my clip, I want to have a nice fade out. So in here, I would do audio effects, or I'm sorry, I would do video transitions, dissolve, cross dissolve, and then just drop this on the end, and then you would see, give us a nice fade to black. I might want to do the same thing with the audio, so that way, at the end of my clip, both my video and my audio fades to black. So those are some of the basic edits that you need to know in Premiere. And what we're going to do now is save our project and then prepare it for export. One of the tricky things about Premiere is that you need to make sure that your sequence is selected. So that's signified here by this yellow outline. Otherwise, if your clip is selected and you go for export, then what's going to happen is the clip is going to be exported and not the sequence. So again, click inside of the sequence and then go File, Export, Media. Now, some of this has changed between Creative Suite 6 and Creative Cloud, which you may be working on. So bear with me here. But what I would do, this is going to be the same regardless of the platform, is format is always H.264. And preset, you may have one that says medium bit rate. That's the one that you would want to choose if you're in Creative Cloud. But since I'm not, I'm going to choose HD 720 29.97. And that's going to give me a pretty good output. I don't want to get too much into streams and feeds and things like that because you can get really bogged down Because ultimately when you throw your clip up on YouTube, YouTube is going to transcode it into a format that it wants, and usually that is lower than 2 megabits per second. So I'm not going to worry too much about the format there. I am going to change my output name to. Usually my naming convention is date first, so 1104, and then something descriptive about the file. So bu project, b-roll, edit, and then click save, and then I'm going to click export. It's going to export my footage as an MP4, and then I'm going to take that footage and then upload that to YouTube. Keep in mind when you upload to YouTube, you have to make sure that you specify a descriptive title, add a subhead, and then fill out the tags field as well. If you have any additional questions, let me know. But that concludes our basic tutorial on using Adobe Premiere. Thanks for joining me.